Your stories don't define you. How you tell them will. Hi, I'm Sarah Elkins, your host and chief storymaker of Elkins Consulting. Many of my clients reach out to me because they're in transition. Their children are hitting milestone ages. They want more from their work. They're hitting a big number birthday. And they want to develop clarity about their natural strengths, what their next adventure might look like. In this series, you'll hear me ask my guests questions to dig deeply into the stories that shaped their lives, stories that uncover patterns and may unveil insights into dissatisfaction, and also where their strengths lie and where they found and continue to find joy. This podcast's intention is to have listeners think of their own related stories and how they tell them, discovering the internal messages that are limiting their success, and discovering how to shift their stories so they become positive life lessons to move them forward. If you're curious about what it would be like to work with me, visit elkinsconsulting.com and schedule a one-time 90-minute StrengthsFinder session. Finding clarity isn't a one-time thing. It was a pivotal time in my life, but I didn't know it yet. All I knew was that I was miserable. I kept telling myself I could get through this. I told myself I was lucky. I had a nice house, food to eat, and an extraordinary community of supportive and loving family and friends. And though I had a job that was a bad fit and a boss who was controlling, manipulative, and cruel, there were people with far less. I should be happy, grateful, satisfied. But I wasn't. I was miserable. I did something that surprised me, something that was really hard and out of my comfort zone. I asked for help. I reached out to 3 people in my community that I had great respect for, who knew me, but not really well, and who I believed would provide good ideas, insights, and mentorship. Each of them provided a completely different kind of support. One said to me knowingly, "Sarah, whatever job you apply for next, just make sure the words special projects are somewhere in the title." Another offered me an analogy that I've used often since then about getting stuck driving behind a semi on the highway and not being able to pass. If you're curious, that analogy is the last chapter in my book. Your stories don't define you, how you tell them will. The third person made a few key introductions and really helped me identify some of my strengths, which was important because my confidence had dropped below the radar. My job was so consuming and frustrating that I didn't even know what I was good at anymore. After meeting with each of these kind and thoughtful souls, I took some time to think about what I really wanted to do next, which of the activities I had done in different jobs that I enjoyed, and which ones drained me. That exercise eventually led me to where I am now, happily self-employed, with incredibly rewarding, impactful work. Eventually. It took me over 5 years to stop ignoring what the universe was telling me to do. I kept ignoring the nudges, partly because I wasn't sure I was qualified. Hello, Imposter Syndrome. What are you doing here? And partly because I had a negative impression of the phrase life coach. To this day, I actively and assertively fight that label for myself, not because life coaches aren't valuable. There are certainly some who are ethical and incredibly impactful. I just don't see myself in that role. I'm far too practical, unsentimental, and I don't consider myself to be especially sensitive or sympathetic. And yet, for years, friends and strangers have stopped to talk and tell me about their dissatisfaction, the struggles they're facing with their jobs and relationships, coming to me for guidance, listening, and to come up with strategies together. Last summer, I was walking with my dog Toby on Mount Helena when he met a super sweet furry friend and they started to play together. It was so cute seeing him with this little dog jumping and rolling and playing on the mountain. The pup's owner and I started chatting, and wouldn't you know it, she started to tell me about the questions she was starting to ask herself about what was next. She has invested decades into a successful career, And because of the pandemic and a looming big birthday, she's starting to wonder, what if? She's on the path, so to speak, of a career and life transformation. It was just a few months later that I met another woman on the mountain in nearly the same location who shared very similar thoughts about her career and her life. The what ifs of a career transition or transformation were everywhere. This fall, I realized I had at least a dozen of these stories in just a few months, some with friends I know well, and others with total strangers. It made me realize the universe was giving me a nudge. Here's the analogy I've been sharing with these friends, strangers, and clients, and then diving into sessions and helping guide them towards some form of clarity. You're so hungry. You didn't even know you were hungry until recently. But once you noticed, you realized you were famished, and it's been going on for a long time. You've been busy feeding everyone but yourself, feeling guilt or shame for even considering your own dissatisfaction. But now, with this gnawing known hunger, you can no longer ignore it. It's showing up in frustration with family and friends at work, and even in your sleep. So now you're wandering around looking for something to eat. The scent of delicious food from a nearby restaurant catches your attention. You walk inside with a smile on your face, feeling like something good is going to happen. And then you look at the menu. It's a mile long and totally overwhelming. So you walk back out, still hungry. All these options, it's just too much. You don't even know what questions to ask yourself. Every person I've shared this analogy with nods, smiles, and I can see on their faces the full recognition in how this resonates with them. We are in a time with millions of opportunities at our doorstep, more than ever before. And yet it feels impossible to choose, to know where to start. And that's why I finally decided to create a course. Not everyone can afford a full session or multiple sessions with a coach. This is the Discovering Clarity course. It's 5 short modules, easy to digest audio recordings under 8 minutes each, along with simple but important exercises to guide you toward clarity, toward asking yourself questions that will help you decide on an item from your menu, order it, and then take your first bite. As I mentioned multiple times in the course, the key here is the understanding that what you order first doesn't have to be the only thing you order. You can take a few bites, realize it's not quite what you wanted, and go back to try something else. The key here is to address the hunger first, and then refine your taste to address the underlying dissatisfaction. Clarity isn't a one-time thing. Having a strategy to periodically reassess what satisfaction and success look like to you is critical. If you've read my book by the same name as this podcast, this course will be a great complement to the stories you uncovered while reading it. Because the truth is that your strengths are your stories. When you know which of your stories demonstrate your talents, your values, your character, you can make the next step in your transformation far more intentional and effective. And from now until December 31st, use the code MENU, MENU, for a $50 discount on the course, bringing the price to an easy-to-digest $99. You won't regret this investment in yourself. Don't leave the restaurant hungry. Find satisfaction for yourself so that you can continue to satisfy the people you love. Are you ready to start your story portfolio so you have the right story ready to share when the opportunity presents itself? When you're ready to get started, My book, Your Stories Don't Define You, How You Tell Them Will, is available in all the regular places, and the audiobook version is available on Google Play and on my website, elkinsconsulting.com. As a special bonus for listeners, the audiobook includes 2 songs recorded by my band, Spare Change, in my living room in Montana. Also on my website is a free podcast interview checklist. It's available to download to make sure you make the most out of your next podcast interview. If you enjoyed this podcast, please feel free to rate the podcast and leave a review, and let me know that you've done it so I can thank you properly. Thank you.